Let's start off by talking about Operation Paget. Now, what caused this driver, Henry Paul, the acting head security at the Ritz Hotel, and a licensed driver to drastically lose control of the car? According to a statement from French authorities given the Monday after the crash, Henry Paul's blood exceeded the legal blood alcohol limit. He had reportedly been drinking and driving recklessly. Testing also found that he had some prescription drugs in his system, including some SSRIs, which should not be mixed with alcohol. So really, he was screwed up, messed up on drugs, on alcohol, and driving one of the most important people in the world. It was found that the driver's alcohol level were 3 times over the allowed limit. So the question is, why was this drunk man named the person responsible for Princess Diana?
3 days after the funeral, the French investigators uncover that Henri Paul had also been on antidepressants. Both Prozac and Tiapridol were found in his system, which might have suggested he was taking medication for alcohol withdrawals. It's also concluded that the mixing of antidepressants and alcohol likely severely impaired Paul's judgment that night.
For some people, what happened that night wasn't simply a tragic accident. Instead, it was a result of some kind of conspiracy conducted secretly by agents of the British state or something else, so they claim. Let's explore it. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but let's explore it. The conspiracies have been so convincing and so widespread, helped by the Daily Express and Egyptian businessman Mohammed, that Met police were forced to launch Operation Paget, an inquiry to establish whether there was any truth in the theories. It lasted years and cost millions of pounds, and found that the theories were entirely without foundation, and all that happened that night was an incredibly unfortunate accident.
You believe there was a conspiracy to kill
Definitely.
Dodi?
They been murdered. Dodi and Diana been murdered, definitely. I am the father who knows everything, who follow up everything, who see things, because I am the one who been hit by the tragedy.
Who would want them dead? And why would anyone want to kill them, Dodi and Diana?
Because they still don't accept that Dodi, my son, an Egyptian, a Muslim, can be the stepfather of the future king.
Now, Mohammed has an interesting take. I mean, of course he has stakes in this because his son Dodi was killed and was dating Princess Diana, but he says this was political and religious, that Dodi and Diana, they were going to be together, and that eventually Prince William would become king, and that if Dodi, a Muslim man, was like the stepfather to a king, the King of England, that they would not allow that to happen, and that breaking that type of traditional norm was too much. So they set up Diana and Dodi for death. So in 2004, the British Metropolitan Police launched an investigation into the rumors that were pushed by Mohammed. The police examined 175 theories about what had happened that night, and some of them were small and some of them were profound. But it was found that none of them were true, according to the police that are, paid for by the government, costing millions of dollars, about 3.6 million pounds, and spanning the course of 3 years. The project included 14 investigators who interviewed 300 witnesses, including members of the royal family like Prince William and then Prince Charles, and compiled more than 600 pieces of evidence, as well as re-examining testimony and evidence from previous French inquiries. One of the reasons why Mohammed believes his son Dodi and Dodi's girlfriend Princess Diana were targeted was because Princess Diana was pregnant. According to Mohammed, the reason for the killing was that Diana had become pregnant with his son's child, and he believes the British government would not accept that she would have a child with a Muslim man. Mohammed said discussion of a potential pregnancy came up even before Diana died. During a holiday in France a few weeks before, some newspapers speculated that she might be pregnant, and that speculation was buoyed up by mysterious comments that Diana had made about a big surprise. But when it comes to the autopsy, there was no sign of pregnancy. So her blood said there was no sign of pregnancy. There was no evidence that she may have been pregnant.
The Princess of Wales was not pregnant at the time of her death. Our conclusions were strengthened by forensic tests carried out on blood recovered from the Mercedes car when we brought it back to this country.
Now, some people believe that Diana kind of saw this coming if the government had been going after her. Diana believed that she was going to be killed by the establishment. The main motivating factor behind the conspiracies is the belief that Diana herself thought she was going to be killed, and that much it appears to be true. Diana wrote a letter to her butler saying, "I am sitting here at my desk today in October, longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep strong and to hold my head high. This particular phase of my life is the most dangerous. It is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, a serious head injury in order to make the path clear for Charles to marry." Now, she doesn't say who is planning this, but she clearly says blank is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, or a serious head injury, because Prince Charles wants to marry and Diana is in the way of this. Other people claim that Diana's medical care was deliberately sabotaged. Conspiracy theorists believe that doctors allowed Diana to die on purpose by not treating her in the proper way. Most of this revolves around her treatment at the scene of the crash. If she had instead been taken to the nearest hospital and treated there, she may have survived. Part of the belief in this theory comes from the fact that the French approach to emergency care is simply different than the UK. In France, emergency crews focus on giving treatment at the scene before moving a person to the hospital. But in the UK, and I believe at the US, it's about moving someone to the hospital as fast as possible. So there may be some cultural differences, and it wasn't a sabotage, but Diana probably would have benefited from going straight to a hospital opposed to getting to a hospital like 2 hours after the accident, which I believe that's how long it took.
The ambulance did not go to the nearest hospital, but to La Petite-Salpêtrière, still a distance of less than 3 miles. It was 1 hour and 43 minutes after the accident when Diana got to hospital. Every inquiry has rejected suggestions that this was part of a conspiracy. Normal practice in France is for paramedics to try to stabilize and treat victims at the scene. By the time Diana got to the operating theater, she was in a desperate state.
As the writers of the Operation Paget report note, such a conspiracy would require a substantial number of expert doctors and other caregivers to both break their ethics and then lie about doing so. So they conclude that this, setup of her not going to the hospital right away could not have happened. Another popular conspiracy around Princess Diana's death is that the paparazzi were responsible for killing her on purpose.
The Paris police found fragments of the rear light of a white Fiat Uno in the tunnel.
The Mercedes wing mirror was found at this point, with traces of another car's paintwork and shards of a Fiat tail light. The Mercedes was thrown into the right-hand wall, then hurled across into the 13th pillar in the middle of the tunnel.
The French police examined 4,668 vehicles, but did not find any Fiat Uno which had been damaged in this way. Al-Fayed hired a team of senior retired French policemen, and they claimed to have solved the mystery. In a field, they found this Fiat. Its taillight had just been replaced, and it belonged to a man who had spent the summer photographing Dodi and Diana, James Andonson. He was one of the most famous paparazzis in the world. Andonson told people he was in the tunnel on the night of the crash. A footnote to all this is that Andonson died later in 2000 after setting fire to himself in his own car in a deserted woodland. Lord Stevens added, "There is no evidence whatsoever that he was murdered."
That's a little concerning. This man just ended up burning himself to death in his car in the middle of the woods, and he did it to himself. I wonder what type of guilt he was living with. But ultimately, the 800-page findings of this operation echoed that the conclusions made by the French authorities that the crash was due to a drunk driver is in fact true, that she was not set up for death by the government, but in fact this drunk driver made a poor choice and killed an important person. Now Mohammed, Dodi's father, said the results were garbage, saying, "I'm certain 100% that the leading member of the royal family has planned that, and the whole plot was executed on his order with the help of members of the government." In 2008, there was a separate investigation where the coroner's office did determine that the paparazzis played a role in Dodi and Diana's death, which I would say, yeah, duh. But now it's on paper and it's confirmed that they did play a role, but there really is no jurisdiction where these paparazzis could be held accountable. Now, of course, a death affects a lot of people, especially when it's a famous person like Princess Diana. Her children also had a lot to go through, realizing that their mother was no longer going to be there for them, because Diana was kind of a pillar in the royal family. She was normal. People liked her. She was the people's princess, and she really provided some stability for her sons. After the accident, Prince William and Prince Harry were shielded from the public, and the brothers have only recently began to open up about how this devastating loss affected them. Prince Harry said, quote, "I really regret not ever talking about it. For the first 28 years of my life, I never talked about it. It's okay to suffer, but as long as you talk about it, it's not weakness. Weakness is having a problem and not recognizing it, and not solving that problem."
I didn't have anyone to turn to. The family, they very much have this mentality of, this is just how it is.
Pain that is not transformed ends up coming out in all sorts of different ways.
I was willing to drink, I was willing to take drugs, I was willing to try and do the things that made me feel less like I was feeling. I would probably drink a week's worth in one day on a Friday or a Saturday night.
3 days after Princess Diana was laid to rest, the Queen put out a statement saying, "We have all felt those emotions these last few days. So what I say to you now as your Queen and as your grandmother, I say from the heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being in good times and bad. She never lost her capacity to smile and to laugh. I admire and respect her for her energy and commitment to others, especially for her devotion to her 2 boys.
I was so angry with what happened to her and the fact that there was no justice at all. She was very much still alive on the back seat. And those people that caused the accident, instead of helping, we're taking photographs of her dying on the back seat. Every single time I hear a click, every single time I see a flash, it takes me straight back.
It's really interesting to hear how Prince Harry reflects on this, because he feels like there hasn't been justice, which is how most people do feel. I mean, the driver, if he's at fault, then, he's dead. So there's no justice there. The paparazzis, we can't really hold them accountable. The people who are supposed to be responding, it seems like Harry believes that they did not act in good faith. So really, he has to live with this, and there's no real way for him to get to the bottom of it. Harry said, "My mother had just died, and I had to walk a long way behind her coffin, surrounded by thousands of people watching me while millions more did on television. I don't think any child should be asked to do that under any circumstances. I don't think it would happen today." Harry said that he was outside his body during her funeral, so he was dissociating. He said, "The thing I remember the most was the sound of the horse's hooves going along the pavement, along the mall, the brick road. It was like I was outside my body, just walking along, doing what was expected of me, showing 1/10 of the emotion that everyone else was showing. And this was my mom. You never even met her." So he's over here numb, walking down past his mother's coffin while everyone around him is sobbing, and he can't feel a thing because he's not allowed to, because he's got to do everything else that a little boy probably shouldn't do when his mom had just died. Diana's brother, Lord Spencer, blamed the media for the crash and called his sister the most hunted person of the modern age. Now, Harry has spoken more about Diana's death and the impact it's had on him more than his brother, and it does seem like it really has shaped him as a man, and probably why he has left his role at the royal family, why he acts a certain way when it comes to his own children. And you've got to admit, on a human level, these type of traumatic events, they affect you for the rest of your lives. So this behavior, his way of coping, it makes sense to me.
And when Harry became a new dad, he was desperate to protect his son. So he reached out to Charles one last time.
Meghan Markle and baby Archie, favorite targets of ruthless media. What will the royal family do?
What I was seeing was history repeating itself. My father, he stopped taking my calls. I feel really let down, and Archie's his grandson.
And when Charles didn't step up, Harry had only one choice to help Archie.
Isn't this all about breaking the cycle? That whatever pain and suffering has happened to you that you don't pass on?
That was one of the biggest reasons to leave.
So Prince Harry's decision to leave the royal family was inspired by his mother, her bravery to challenge the traditions and to break the cycle. And he didn't want his son or his wife to live through that. So that is a lot of strength. You've got to give them that. Both William and Harry have honored Diana through their daughters' names. Princess Charlotte Elliott Diana was born on May 2nd, 2015 by William and his wife Kate, and Harry and his wife Meghan Markle welcomed their daughter Princess Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor. Woo, that's a mouthful. In June 2021. Thank you for watching this clip from the Let's Get Into It podcast. To view the full episode, visit the link listed below.